It was a bright Tuesday morning at Atlanta International Airport, bustling with travelers rushing to their gates. At Gate B7, the morning sun streamed through the large windows, casting a warm glow on the polished floors. The first officer had just completed the pre-flight checks, and passengers were beginning to line up for boarding the Chicago-bound flight. Standing proudly at the aircraft door was the flight's captain, a black woman who had earned her wings through years of dedication and hard work. Her crisp navy uniform bore the 4 stripes that marked her rank, and her welcoming smile put nervous flyers at ease as they boarded. She had flown this route countless times over her 15-year career, building a reputation for smooth landings and excellent communication with her crew. The boarding process was going smoothly, with business people stowing their laptops and families helping their children find their seats. The usual mix of excitement and travel anxiety filled the air. The captain maintained her professional demeanor, greeting each passenger with a warm good morning as they stepped onto the plane. That's when she noticed a woman in the middle of the line doing a dramatic double take. This passenger, dressed in designer clothes, with perfectly manicured nails and wearing an expensive watch, stood frozen for a moment. Her eyes widened and her mouth formed a tight line as she stared at the captain. The passenger's designer handbag swung wildly as she stepped out of line, causing others to stumble slightly. "Excuse me," the woman said loudly, her voice carrying across the gate area. "There must be some mistake." She looked around as if expecting someone else to share her apparent confusion. Several nearby passengers turned to watch the scene unfold, while others pretended not to notice, uncomfortable with the brewing confrontation. The captain maintained her professional smile, though something in her eyes suggested she knew exactly what was coming. She'd seen that look before. The disbelief, the poorly disguised prejudice, the assumption that she couldn't possibly be qualified for her position. Still, she responded with the courtesy and patience that had served her well throughout her career. "How can I help you, ma'am?" the captain asked, her voice steady and professional. Her hands were clasped in front of her, her posture straight but relaxed, showing the confidence of someone who had earned their position through years of hard work and dedication. The woman's face flushed red as she clutched her designer purse closer to her chest. "I'd like to speak with the actual pilot," she announced, loud enough for everyone in the immediate vicinity to hear. Other passengers in line began to shift uncomfortably, some pulling out their phones, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. The first officer, who had been checking something in the cockpit, stepped into view. He looked from the captain to the agitated passenger, immediately assessing the situation. The ground crew loading luggage below paused their work, watching the scene through the terminal windows. The flight attendants, who had been helping other passengers settle in, noticed the commotion and began making their way toward the aircraft door. They had worked with this captain before and knew her to be one of the most skilled pilots in their fleet. The lead flight attendant already had his phone ready to document what was quickly becoming an incident that would need reporting. As tension built in the boarding area, other passengers began whispering among themselves. A young girl tugged on her mother's sleeve, asking in a loud whisper why the lady was being mean to the pilot. The mother shushed her child, but her eyes showed clear disapproval of the passenger's behavior. Little did anyone know that this ordinary morning at Gate B7 was about to become anything but ordinary, and the events that would unfold in the next few minutes would not only go viral but would spark a nationwide conversation about prejudice in professional settings. The woman's voice grew louder as she pointed a manicured finger at the captain. "I refuse to fly on this plane if you're the pilot," she declared, her designer sunglasses now perched on top of her head. "I've been flying for 30 years and I've never seen someone like you in the cockpit. How did you even get this job?" The captain took a steady breath, her shoulders straight and dignified. She'd faced situations like this before, though usually not quite so public. "Ma'am, I understand your concern. I've been flying commercially for 15 years, have over 10,000 flight hours, and am fully qualified to operate this aircraft. I'd be happy to discuss my credentials with you." But the woman wasn't interested in credentials. She waved her hand dismissively, her voice dripping with disdain. Please, we all know how you got this job. It's that affirmative action nonsense. I want a real pilot, someone who earned their position the proper way." A collective gasp went through the crowd of waiting passengers. Several people pulled out their phones, their cameras now recording the scene. The young girl who had noticed the commotion earlier buried her face in her mother's side, clearly distressed by the hostility in the air. "Did she really just say that?" whispered one passenger to another. In 2024, the lead flight attendant stepped forward, his face professional but firm. "Ma'am, I need to remind you that discriminatory behavior isn't tolerated by our airline. Our captain is one of our most experienced pilots, and we're proud to have her commanding this aircraft." The woman spun around to face the growing crowd of onlookers as if seeking support. Instead, she found stunned faces and shaking heads. An elderly gentleman in a veteran's cap spoke up from his wheelchair. "Young lady, I've been flying since before you were born, including combat missions. The only thing that matters in that cockpit is skill, and from what I've heard about this captain, she's got plenty of it." Rather than backing down, the woman's face grew redder. She fumbled in her designer bag, pulling out her phone. "I want to speak to someone in charge right now. I'm going to call your corporate office. I have status with this airline. Do you know how much money I spend flying every year?" The captain remained calm, though anyone looking closely might have noticed her hands clasped a bit tighter. Years of training had taught her that staying professional was crucial, especially in tense situations. "Ma'am, as the captain of this aircraft, I am in charge of this flight. If you're uncomfortable with that, I can have our gate agent help you book a different flight." Other passengers in line began to voice their support for the captain. A businesswoman in a sharp suit stepped forward. "I fly this route twice a month, and I've never had a smoother flight than when this captain is at the controls. You're the only one with a problem here." The woman's response was to raise her voice even higher, now incorporating more offensive language about standards dropping and political correctness gone mad. Several passengers covered their children's ears, while others openly recorded the incident on their phones. The first officer, who had been observing the situation, now spoke into his radio, requesting assistance from ground staff. He knew from experience that this situation needed proper documentation and handling. Throughout it all, the captain maintained her composure, though her eyes reflected both hurt and determination. A few rows of seated passengers inside the plane had gotten up to see what was causing the delay, creating a small crowd at the aircraft door. They watched as the woman continued her tirade, her voice getting shriller with each passing moment. The scene was building to a climax that would soon become a viral sensation and spark conversations across the country. Little did the angry passenger know that her next actions would not only result in serious consequences for herself, but would also lead to an unexpected chain of events that would impact airline policies and inspire thousands of young aspiring pilots across the nation. Two airport security officers approached Gate B7, their blue uniforms parting the crowd of onlookers. The woman's face lit up when she saw them, clearly expecting them to take her side. She rushed toward them, her designer heels clicking against the airport floor. "Finally, someone with authority," she exclaimed, gesturing wildly at the captain. "I demand something be done about this situation. This is completely unacceptable." The taller security officer glanced at his partner, then addressed the woman calmly. "Ma'am, we received reports of a passenger causing a disturbance. Could you explain what seems to be the problem?" The woman launched into her complaint, not realizing she was only making things worse for herself. "They're trying to make me fly with," she gestured dismissively at the captain, "when there must be more qualified pilots available." The shorter security officer's expression hardened as he listened. He'd worked at the airport for 12 years and had enormous respect for all the flight crews, especially this particular captain, whose friendly greetings had brightened many of his early morning shifts. Meanwhile, the flight attendants had begun documenting everything. One was discreetly recording the interaction on his company-issued tablet, while another was on the phone with airline operations. The lead attendant was checking on the passengers already aboard, apologizing for the delay. A young boy, about 10 years old, tugged at his father's sleeve and asked loudly, "Dad, why is that lady so angry at the pilot? She flies the plane really well. Remember when we had her last summer on our trip to Grandma's?" The woman spun around, seemingly shocked that anyone would defend the captain. "You don't understand. This is about standards, about safety, about prejudice," interrupted a calm voice. Everyone turned to see an elderly black woman rising slowly from her wheelchair. Her aged face carried wisdom earned through decades of similar confrontations. "I've seen this all my life, child. You're not fooling anyone with talk about standards." The security officers exchanged knowing looks. The taller one stepped forward. "Ma'am, we've had enough. This airline has a strict non-discrimination policy. We need you to step aside so we can discuss this situation privately." But the woman wasn't done. She pulled out her phone again, this time starting to record. "Everyone needs to see this. This is reverse discrimination. I'm being denied my rights as a paying customer." A gate agent arrived with a supervisor, both looking concerned but professional. The supervisor, a middle-aged man with graying temples, had already been briefed on the situation. He approached the group with paperwork in hand. "Ma'am," he addressed the woman firmly, "I've reviewed the situation. Not only is our captain fully qualified with an outstanding record, but your behavior violates our passenger code of conduct. We will not be able to allow you to board this flight." The woman's jaw dropped. "What? Do you know who I am? I'm a Platinum member. I demand to speak to someone higher up." The supervisor remained calm. "This isn't a matter for debate. We can book you on another flight with a different airline, but you will not be flying with us today. Furthermore, due to your discriminatory behavior, we'll be reviewing your future travel privileges with our airline." The gathered crowd had grown larger, with passengers from nearby gates drawn to the commotion. Many were still recording, their phones capturing what was quickly becoming a viral moment in aviation history. Throughout all this, the captain maintained her professional demeanor, though a close observer might have noticed the slight trembling of her hands, not from fear, but from the effort of containing emotions that no professional should have to deal with in their workplace. The situation was about to take an even more dramatic turn, as the woman's response to being denied boarding would shock everyone present and lead to consequences she never anticipated. The woman's face turned an even deeper shade of red as she processed the news that she wouldn't be allowed to board. Her designer bag dropped to the floor with a thud, and she pointed her finger at each person around her in turn. "You can't do this to me," she shrieked, her voice echoing through the terminal. "I'll sue. I'll call my lawyer right now. Do you know how much money I make? I could buy and sell all of you." The other passengers watched in stunned silence as she began frantically dialing on her phone. A businessman in the crowd whispered to his seatmate, "She's really making this so much worse for herself." The security officers moved closer, maintaining a professional but firm stance. "Ma'am, we need you to lower your voice and come with us," the taller officer said calmly. "We can discuss this away from the gate." But instead of complying, the woman did something that left everyone gasping. She grabbed her bottle of water from her bag and flung it toward the captain. The bottle didn't hit anyone, but water splashed across the floor, creating a small puddle near the boarding door. The crowd reacted immediately. Several people rushed forward to make sure the captain was okay, while others called out in shock. The security officers quickly stepped between the woman and the flight crew, their training kicking in. "That's assault," someone in the crowd yelled. She tried to attack the pilot. The elderly veteran in his wheelchair spoke up again, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "Young lady, you've just crossed a very serious line. That's not just airline policy anymore. That's a federal offense." The woman seemed to realize what she'd done. The color drained from her face as quickly as it had appeared. Her phone slipped from her trembling fingers, clattering to the floor. I didn't mean to. I was just." The lead flight attendant was already on his radio, updating operations about the escalation. The supervisor pulled out his phone, calling for additional security. This had gone from a customer service issue to a potential criminal matter. Through it all, the captain remained remarkably composed. She stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. "I want it noted that while I'm pressing charges for the attempted assault, I truly hope this becomes a learning moment. Hate and anger only hurt the person carrying them." A young girl who had been watching everything turned to her mother and said, "Mom, I want to be just like her when I grow up." Her mother hugged her close, tears in her eyes. "That's what real strength looks like, sweetie." More security officers arrived, along with airport police. As they began taking statements from witnesses, passengers from nearby gates applauded the captain's handling of the situation. someone started a slow clap that spread through the terminal. The woman, now facing serious consequences, began to cry. "Please, I have an important meeting in Chicago. I can't miss this flight. I'll apologize. I'll do anything." The supervisor shook his head. "I'm sorry, but after attempting to assault our captain, you'll need to leave with these officers. We'll be sharing this incident with other airlines as well. This type of behavior has no place in air travel." As the police officers led the woman away, she looked back one last time at the scene she had created. The captain stood tall in her uniform, surrounded by supportive crew members and passengers, her dignity intact despite everything that had happened. The incident would soon explode across social media, but what happened next would surprise everyone, especially the airline industry. This moment would become a catalyst for change that nobody could have predicted. As police officers escorted the woman away, the atmosphere at Gate B7 began to shift. The supervisor turned to the waiting passengers with an apologetic smile. "Folks, we'll begin boarding again in just a few minutes. We appreciate your patience during this unfortunate incident." But something unexpected happened. Instead of showing frustration about the delay, passengers began approaching the captain with words of support and encouragement. A young flight attendant quickly mopped up the spilled water, while others helped reorganize the boarding line. "I've been recording since she started," said a college student, stepping forward. "I've got everything, including when she threw the water bottle. I'd be happy to send it to the airline for evidence." The elderly woman in the wheelchair rolled closer to the captain. "Honey, I've been alive long enough to see things change. Sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. What happened here today, that's the past trying to hold on. But you, standing there with such grace, that's the future." A middle-aged businessman raised his hand to get everyone's attention. "I travel weekly for work, and I've actually flown with this captain before. One of the smoothest landings I've ever experienced was during a thunderstorm with her at the controls. Can we give her a round of applause?" The terminal erupted in genuine, heartfelt applause. Even passengers waiting at other gates joined in, though many weren't sure exactly what they were clapping for. The captain, touched by the support, gave a small wave of acknowledgement. The first officer checked his watch and spoke quietly to the captain. Despite the delay, they could still make their arrival time if they started boarding soon. The captain nodded, straightened her uniform, and turned to address the crowd. "Thank you all for your support," she said, her voice clear and professional. "But the best way we can move forward is by doing our jobs. We're ready to get you all to Chicago safely, if you're ready to board." A small girl near the front of the line tugged on her father's sleeve. "Dad, can I say something to the pilot?" After getting a nod, she stepped forward shyly. "My teacher said we should stand up to bullies, but you didn't even get mad. You're really brave." The captain knelt down to the girl's level. "Sometimes being brave means staying calm when others aren't. Are you ready for your flight to Chicago?" As boarding resumed, passengers began sharing the videos they'd taken. Within minutes, the incident was being uploaded to various social media platforms. One passenger's tweet reading, "Watch this pilot handle racism with incredible grace," was already gaining thousands of retweets. The lead flight attendant received a call from the airline's corporate office. They had already seen the videos circulating online and wanted to make sure the crew was okay. News organizations were reaching out for comments, and the airline's social media team was preparing a statement. Meanwhile, in the terminal's security office, the woman was beginning to understand the full consequences of her actions. Her phones buzzed continuously as the videos went viral. Friends and family members were messaging her, having recognized her in the footage spreading across the internet. Back at the gate, as the final passengers boarded, the supervisor received an unexpected call. The airline's CEO wanted to personally speak with the captain after the flight landed in Chicago. Something big was about to happen, something that would change airline policy and inspire a new generation of pilots. The captain took her seat in the cockpit, running through her pre-flight checklist with practiced precision. In a few hours, this incident would be making national news, but right now, she had a plane to fly and passengers counting on her to get them safely to their destination. As the plane cruised at 36,000 feet toward Chicago, passengers were already making the incident go viral. The videos were spreading like wildfire across social media platforms, with views climbing into the hundreds of thousands. People weren't just sharing the videos, They were sharing their own stories of facing discrimination in professional settings. A tech executive in first class was composing an email to his daughter who dreamed of becoming a pilot. "I witnessed something today that you need to see," he wrote. "This is why you should never let anyone tell you what you can't do." The flight attendants moved through the cabin with extra attention to detail, knowing that this flight would be remembered by everyone on board. Passengers kept approaching them with words of support for the captain, sharing their own stories of discrimination they'd faced or witnessed. Back in Atlanta, the airport police were finishing their report. The woman sat in an office, her designer makeup smeared from crying, as she watched her face appear on more and more news sites. Her company had already called. They'd seen the videos and wanted to discuss her continued employment. Meanwhile, in the airline's corporate headquarters, executives were holding an emergency meeting. The videos had caught the attention of major news networks, and requests for interviews were pouring in. But something more important was happening. Thousands of people were sharing stories of their own experiences with discrimination in aviation. The CEO made a bold decision. This incident wouldn't be handled with just a standard PR response. Instead, they would use it as a catalyst for change. Plans were already being drawn up for a new initiative to support aspiring pilots from underrepresented backgrounds. In the cockpit, the captain focused on her instruments, maintaining her professional composure despite the knowledge that her handling of the situation was now being viewed by millions. The first officer turned to her during a quiet moment. "You know, what happened today is going to change things for a lot of people." Back in the cabin, a group of teenage girls on a school trip were watching one of the videos. Their teacher overheard them discussing career paths they'd never considered before. "If she can handle that situation so professionally, imagine what else she can do," one girl whispered to another. The airline's social media team was overwhelmed with positive messages. People were sharing their own experiences with the captain, stories of her calming nervous passengers, helping elderly travelers, and performing perfectly smooth landings in rough weather. She wasn't just a pilot who handled discrimination well. She was an outstanding pilot, period. As they'd approached Chicago, air traffic control had already heard about the incident. The controller's voice carried extra warmth as he guided them to their landing runway. "Good afternoon, Captain. Smooth sailing into O'Hare today. You've had enough excitement for one day." The woman who had caused the scene was now being booked on charges of attempted assault and disorderly conduct. Her social media accounts were flooded with messages, most expressing disappointment in her behavior. Her country club membership was being reviewed, and her social circle was quickly distancing themselves from her. But something unexpected was happening too. Several civil rights organizations had reached out to the airline not to protest, but to propose partnerships for creating more opportunities in aviation. The incident was becoming more than just another viral video. It was turning into a movement. The captain began their descent into Chicago, handling the controls with the same skill and precision she'd shown throughout her career. She didn't know yet about the CEO waiting to meet her, or about the thousands of supportive messages flooding social media, or about the changes her professionalism had set in motion. The plane touched down smoothly at Chicago O'Hare International Airport, right on schedule despite the earlier delay. As passengers began collecting their belongings, they noticed something unusual through the windows. News vans were parked near the terminal, their satellite dishes reaching into the sky. "Ladies and gentlemen," the lead flight attendant announced, "we've arrived in Chicago. Before we deplane, we'd like to thank you for your patience and support during today's unfortunate incident in Atlanta. Your kindness made a difference." As the captain completed her post-flight checklist, a flight attendant knocked on the cockpit door. "Captain, airline executives are waiting in the terminal. And, well, you might want to see this." She held up her phone, showing social media feeds flooded with hashtags like #FlyWithPride and #RespectYourPilot. The passengers, usually quick to rush off the plane, were taking their time. Many wanted to thank the captain personally. The young girl who had spoken to her in Atlanta handed her a drawing she'd made during the flight. A plane with the words, "Best Pilot Ever" written in crayon. In the terminal, the airline's CEO waited with several executives. They'd spent the flight watching the incident go viral, seeing how their captain's grace under pressure had touched millions. But they weren't just there for a photo opportunity. They had a proposal that would change lives. Meanwhile, back in Atlanta, the woman's story was taking a different turn. Her employer, a major consulting firm, had released a statement distancing themselves from her actions. Her membership in several exclusive clubs was suspended. Friends were sharing stories of previous incidents, painting a picture of a pattern of behavior rather than a one-time mistake. But something unexpected was happening too. Several civil rights organizations had reached out, not to condemn her, but to offer inclusion training. They saw an opportunity for education rather than just punishment. In Chicago, as the captain entered the terminal, she was met with spontaneous applause from waiting passengers and airport staff. The CEO stepped forward, camera crews capturing the moment. But instead of a staged PR event, what happened next was genuinely moving. The CEO spoke from the heart, sharing a personal story about his own mother breaking barriers in the business world. Then he made an announcement that would change the airline industry. The company was launching a new scholarship program for aspiring pilots from underrepresented backgrounds. News cameras rolled as the first scholarship recipient was announced, the young girl from the flight, whose drawing and words had touched everyone's hearts. Her dream of becoming a pilot was now within reach, thanks to a full scholarship for flight school. The captain, still professional but visibly moved, spoke briefly to the press. She didn't focus on the negative incident, but instead talked about her love of flying and her hope that more young people would pursue their dreams regardless of obstacles. Social media continued to explode with support. People were sharing their own stories of overcoming discrimination, creating a movement larger than one incident on one flight. The hashtags were trending worldwide, catching the attention of other airlines and industries. The woman's lawyer released a statement saying his client was seeking counseling and wished to apologize privately to the captain. But this story wasn't about one person's bad behavior anymore, it had become about something much bigger. As the day drew to a close, the captain finally checked her phone. Among thousands of supportive messages was one that brought tears to her eyes. A video of young girls at a science camp, all holding paper airplanes, chanting, "We can be pilots too." 1 week after the incident, the impact continued to grow in unexpected ways. The captain sat in her home, reading through thousands of messages from around the world. People weren't just talking about discrimination anymore, they were taking action to create real change. A morning talk show host appeared on screen, introducing a special segment. The video that captured hearts across the nation has sparked a movement in the aviation industry. Today, we're looking at how one moment of courage is changing the future of flying. The network cut to various clips: young girls in flight simulators, women sharing their stories of breaking barriers, and airlines announcing new diversity initiatives. The captain's calm professionalism had become a masterclass in handling discrimination with dignity. Local schools began inviting pilots to career days, especially reaching out to communities where children might not have considered aviation as a possible future. The airline's new scholarship program had already received thousands of applications, each with a dream and a determination to succeed. The woman from the incident had taken an unexpected turn too. After a week of reflection and counseling, she requested to make amends. Instead of a simple apology, she made a substantial donation to the new scholarship fund. Her statement read, "I was wrong, and I want to be part of the solution." In the airline's headquarters, changes were happening fast. New training programs addressed unconscious bias. Recruitment policies were updated to reach more diverse candidates. Other airlines followed suit, not wanting to be left behind in what was becoming an industry-wide transformation. The captain's inbox filled with invitations. Schools, universities, and organizations wanted her to speak. But she was selective, choosing smaller, more personal events where she could really connect with aspiring pilots. At one such event, a teenage girl asked her secret to staying calm under pressure. "There's no secret," she replied, smiling. "Just remember that your qualifications speak louder than anyone's prejudice. The sky doesn't care about your gender or your skin color, it only cares about how well you fly." Social media couldn't get enough of the story. People shared old photos of pioneering pilots who broke barriers decades ago, connecting past struggles to present progress. The hashtags evolved from viral trending topics to sustained movements for change. The young girl who received the first scholarship was featured in her local newspaper, inspiring others in her community. Her mother told reporters, My daughter used to draw houses and flowers. Now she draws airplanes and flight parts. She says she's practicing for her future. In corporate boardrooms across the country, executives watched the ongoing response. Companies outside aviation began examining their own practices. The incident had sparked conversations about workplace discrimination in all industries. The airline's CEO appeared at a press conference announcing that applications for pilot training programs had increased by 300%. What started as an unfortunate incident, he said, has become a catalyst for positive change. Sometimes it takes one moment of darkness to help us see the light. A month's worth of flight data showed something interesting. More passengers were specifically requesting information about their flight crews, not out of discrimination, but out of admiration. They wanted to know the stories of the people they were trusting with their journey. The captain kept flying her regular routes, maintaining her professional standards. But something had shifted in the industry. Each time she greeted passengers at the gate, she saw more young faces light up with recognition and possibility. 6 months after the incident, the airline industry had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The video that captured one pilot's grace under pressure had become a turning point, but the real story was what happened afterward. The original incident, which began with hatred, had transformed into something beautiful. On this particular morning, the captain stood before a group of 20 young aspiring pilots at the airline's Newt Flight Academy. The room was filled with diverse faces, all sharing the same dream of touching the sky. When I started flying, she told them, I had to fight for every opportunity. But looking at you today, I see a future where talent and dedication are all that matter. The students hum on her every word, their training uniforms crisp and new, their eyes bright with possibility. The woman who had caused the incident had also transformed. After months of diversity training and self-reflection, she became an unexpected advocate for change. She now spoke at corporate events about her journey from prejudice to understanding, though she never tried to make herself the hero of the story. The airline's scholarship program had expanded beyond their initial goals. Other airlines joined in, creating an industry-wide initiative. The young girl who received the first scholarship was now halfway through her private pilot training, her progress followed by thousands on social media. Flight crews reported a change in passenger behavior too. People were more respectful, more curious about aviation careers, more aware of the diverse professionals who kept them safe in the skies. The incident had sparked conversations that needed to happen. The captain's calm response had become part of training materials across different industries. Companies used it to teach conflict resolution and professional grace under pressure. But more importantly, it showed how one person's dignity could inspire thousands. A documentary filmmaker captured the moment when the first wave of scholarship students took their solo flights. Among them was the teenage girl who'd given the captain that crayon drawing 6 months ago. As she landed perfectly, her mother burst into tears of joy. The airline industry's demographics were slowly shifting. More young people from different backgrounds were applying to flight schools. The captain's story had shown them that the sky was truly the limit, regardless of who they were or where they came from. In the airport terminal where it all began, a small plaque was installed. It didn't mention the incident directly, but instead read, "The sky belongs to everyone brave enough to soar." Passengers often paused to take photos, understanding its deeper meaning. The captain herself had received numerous awards and recognition, but she remained focused on her true passion, flying and mentoring the next generation. She still greeted every passenger with the same warm professionalism that had helped transform a moment of hate into a movement of hope. On this day, as she prepared for another flight, a young passenger asked for a photo with her. "You're the reason I believe I can do anything," the child said. The captain smiled, remembering all the doors that had once been closed to her and all the ones that were now opening for others. The story had come full circle. What started as one person's prejudice had sparked a revolution of kindness and opportunity. As the captain's plane lifted into the morning sky, she knew that the real change wasn't just in the policies or programs, it was in the hearts and minds of people who now saw possibility where they once saw limitations.